You are standing in the cereal aisle of a grocery store on a Tuesday morning and you are holding two boxes side by side. One costs $2.49, the other costs $5.99. They look almost identical, same shape, same size, roughly the same color on the box. You flip them over and squint at the nutrition labels, and after about 30 seconds, you put the cheaper one in your cart and walk away feeling like you just won something small. That feeling, that little flicker of satisfaction. That is where this story begins, because that feeling is not wrong exactly, but it is incomplete. And over the next several years of your financial life, that incomplete feeling is going to cost you thousands of dollars, real dollars, in ways you never saw coming. Not because you were careless, not because you were reckless, but because you were trying to do the right thing and nobody ever explained to you the full picture of what cheap actually means. So let's go through it together. Let's walk through your life, the real version, the one with the leaking faucet and the job interview and the winter coat you bought on clearance, and let's trace exactly where the money went and why it went there. By the end of this, you are going to see spending in a way you have never seen it before, and that shift is worth more than any single purchase you will ever make. You are 24 years old and you just moved into your first apartment alone. You have a job that pays $38,000 a year before taxes, which sounds like a lot until rent, utilities, student loan payments, groceries, and a car insurance bill arrive within the same 5 days, and you realize that your bank account is not a reservoir, it is a river and the current moves fast, so you do what anyone does. You start cutting. You start looking for the cheapest version of everything. And honestly, some of that is exactly right. You do not need the premium cable package. You do not need to order delivery 4 times a week. You do not need the name brand cleaning spray when the store brand does the same job. These are real savings and they matter, but then you need a new laptop, your old one is dying. The battery holds a charge for maybe 40 minutes, the screen flickers sometimes when you open too many tabs. You need it for work, for the freelance writing you do on the side, for the online course you started to learn a new skill. This laptop is not a luxury, it is infrastructure. It is the tool you use to make money outside of your regular job. You go online and you find two options. The first one costs $240. It is a lesser known brand. The reviews are okay, not amazing, but okay, and the specs are technically sufficient. The second costs $490. It is a more established brand. The battery life is listed at 10 hours, the reviews are consistently strong, and it comes with a 2-year warranty. You buy the $240 one, and for about 5 months it is fine. Then the trackpad starts sticking. Then the battery starts failing. Then one afternoon, it simply refuses to turn on, and you lose 4 hours of work that you had not saved properly, and you miss a deadline for a client who does not hire you again. 3 months after that, the laptop stops working entirely. You buy another one. This time, you spend $260 because there's a slight upgrade from the first one, and you figure the problem last time was just bad luck. This one lasts 8 months before the hinge on the lid cracks from normal everyday use and the screen starts separating from the body. You buy another one. Now you are sitting at a total of $700 spent on laptops in less than 2 years and you still do not have a reliable machine. You are also out the freelance client, which was worth roughly $300 a month while it lasted. You are behind on the online course. You are tired and frustrated, and you keep telling yourself you just have bad luck with electronics. But it was not bad luck, it was the hidden cost of choosing cheap over value. If you had spent the $490 on the reliable machine, you would have spent $490. Instead, you spent $700. You spent more money, received less reliability, lost income, lost time, lost a professional relationship, and still ended the period without a functioning computer. That is the first lesson written into your actual life. Cheap is a price you pay once at the register and often pay again in time, in stress, in replacement, and in opportunity. Value is a price you pay once and then stop paying. Now it is winter. You need a coat. Not a fashion statement, a functional winter coat because you live somewhere cold and you commute partly on foot and you spend a non-trivial amount of time standing outside waiting for buses or walking to your car in parking lots. You need something that keeps you warm for the next several years. You find a coat on clearance for $22. It is bright, it looks fine, and it is on clearance because the season is already halfway over. You buy it immediately because $22 for a winter coat feels like a heist. It keeps you warm enough for the rest of that winter, which is only about 6 more weeks. The following October, you pull it out of the closet and the zipper immediately jams. and after 5 minutes of fighting with it, you give up, wear it unzipped for a week while telling yourself you will get it fixed. And then it gets cold enough that you genuinely need a functioning coat and you go back out and spend $65 on a new one. The next year, the $65 coat starts pilling aggressively after washing and the lining near the collar begins tearing. You patch it with iron-on fabric for a while, then abandon it. You spend another $75 on a coat. Over 4 years, you spend $162 across 3 coats, none of which you loved, all of which required replacing faster than they should have. A well-made coat from a quality manufacturer, the kind built for actual weather and actual daily use, would have cost you $140 up front and could have lasted you 5 to 7 years with basic care. You spent more, you got less, and every year you went through the same shopping process, the same decision fatigue, the same search, the same transaction. The time that cost you added up across 4 years is something you cannot fully calculate. Time is the thing nobody talks about when they talk about cheap. They talk about dollars, they talk about savings, but the time you spend researching replacements, shopping again, dealing with returns, waiting for deliveries, figuring out why something stopped working, that time has a value. For most people in their working years, that value is higher than they treat it. Smart spending is not about spending more. Let that sink in for a second, because that is where people get confused. Smart spending is not a permission slip to overpay for things. It is not a justification to buy luxury items because you have convinced yourself they are investments. Smart spending is about understanding the full cost of a purchase before you make it. The full cost includes the purchase price. But it also includes the expected lifespan divided into that price, which gives you a cost per use or cost per year figure. It includes the cost of failure if the item fails early. It includes the time you will spend managing, repairing, or replacing it. It includes what economists call the opportunity cost, meaning what else you could have done with that time and energy. When you run those numbers honestly, cheap often stops looking cheap very quickly. Now you're 27. You have learned a little. Not everything, but a little. You have started cooking more at home, which is genuinely saving you money without sacrificing quality because you have learned to cook well. You have started buying certain things secondhand, which is often brilliant because something built to last that someone else has already used is far better value than something new and cheap. You have stopped buying fast fashion for the most part, not because you're trying to be virtuous, but because you kept doing the math, and the math kept telling you the same thing. But then you need to hire someone to do your taxes. You're now doing a small amount of freelance work on top of your regular job, which means your taxes are more complicated than a simple W-2 return. You have some deductions to track, some self-employment income, some equipment purchases that might qualify as write-offs. You need an accountant or at the very least a good tax professional. You find someone online who charges $95 to file your return. You also find a certified public accountant with strong reviews who charges $280 for the same filing. You choose the $95 option. The return gets filed. You feel fine about it. You do not feel particularly guided or advised, but the return is filed and you paid $95 and you tell yourself that is all you needed. 2 years later, during a conversation with a coworker, you learn that freelancers can deduct a portion of their home internet, cost their professional development expenses, the home office space they use exclusively for work, and several other items you had been completely unaware of. You had been leaving money on the table, real money, for 2 full tax years. You go back and look at what you might have deducted. Conservatively, the missed deductions over 2 years represent about $900 in overpaid taxes. The $280 accountant, the one who does this for a living and who would have asked you the right questions in the first intake conversation, would have identified those deductions. Their fee over 2 years would have been $560 total. The deductions they would have found would have saved you $900. You would have come out ahead by $340 and received professional financial guidance in the process. Instead, you chose the $95 option twice, spent $190, received no guidance, and missed $900 in legitimate deductions. The lesson here cuts deeper than taxes. It is about what you are actually buying when you hire someone who knows more than you. You are not just buying a task completion, you are buying access to their knowledge, their experience, their professional judgment. When you find the cheapest possible option for a service that relies on expertise, you are almost always getting the minimum viable version of that expertise. and minimum viable is often exactly what it sounds like. There are categories of spending where expertise is the entire product. Legal advice, medical care, financial planning, structural repairs to your home. Anything where the knowledge gap between you and the professional is large and where the consequences of bad or missing information are significant. In those categories, the cost of cheap is often not visible right away. It appears months later, sometimes years later, sometimes in the form of a problem that would have been easy to prevent and is now expensive to fix. You are 30 now, you have a partner. You are talking about buying a home, which is the largest financial decision most people make in their lives and one of the most emotionally charged. You tour a house that you love. The price is right, the neighborhood feels right, the kitchen has the island you have always wanted, and you find yourself standing in the backyard thinking about summer evenings and feeling something warm and certain in your chest. The home inspection is included in the closing process, and you can add an additional independent inspector for $350. The seller has not been difficult. The listing is clean. The realtor says the house is in great shape. You think about $350 and you think about how much you have already spent on this process, the application fees, the earnest money, the moving estimates, and you decide to skip the independent inspection. You trust the standard one. You buy the house. 14 months later, you notice a soft spot in the floor of the hallway near the bathroom. You have a plumber come look at it, and then you have a contractor come look at it, and then you have a structural specialist come look at it. There has been a slow leak in the bathroom subfloor for what appears to be several years. The damage extends under 2 rooms. The repair estimate is $11,400. The $350 independent inspector you did not hire had a specialty in water damage and structural issues. That is not a guarantee they would have caught this, but experienced independent inspectors catch things that standard inspections miss regularly and consistently, and this particular kind of damage, the slow hidden kind, is exactly what they are trained to find. $11,400. That number will sit with you for a long time. You find a way to cover it. You tap your emergency fund, which you have been building carefully, and you supplement it with a small personal loan that takes 18 months to pay off. You get through it. But that is 18 months of your financial life that could have been invested, saved, put towards something that grows, and instead it goes toward fixing a problem that the $350 decision left invisible. Here is what all of these stories have in common. In every single one, you were not being careless. You were being careful. You were trying to protect your money. You were doing what felt responsible in the moment. And that is what makes this so important to understand, because the instinct to choose cheap is not a bad instinct. It comes from a good place. It comes from scarcity, from caution, from watching your money and wanting it to go further. But cheap and value are not the same thing. They look alike at the register, and they diverge sharply over time. Value is defined not by what something costs to acquire, but by what it costs you across its entire lifespan, including the failures, the replacements, the time, the professional consequences, and the decisions it either enables or prevents. Cheap spending asks one question: what is the price today? Value spending asks a different set of questions. How long will this serve me? What happens if it fails? What am I giving up by choosing the lower tier here? Is this a category where expertise matters more than price? What would it cost me to replace this in 2 years versus buying something better today? Learning to ask those questions consistently is not about being a different kind of person. It is not about having more money to start with. Some of the best value decisions you can make cost less than the cheap alternative once you account for everything honestly. Buying secondhand quality is almost always better than buying new cheap. Spending modestly on fewer things you actually use beats spending on many things that fail or sit unused. Paying for real expertise in high-stakes situations protects you from costs that dwarf the fee difference. And when you genuinely cannot afford the better option right now, that is a completely real situation, and it happens to almost everyone at some point. The answer is not to buy cheap and hope. The answer is to wait if you can, to save until the better option is reachable, to research the secondhand market, to ask whether this is truly a right now necessity or whether the purchase can be deferred. Sometimes cheap is the only realistic option in the moment, but even then you should know that you're accepting a risk, not eliminating a cost. You are sitting at your kitchen table now, the one you bought used from someone moving across the country, the solid wood one that cost you $80 and has not wobbled once in 3 years. Your coffee is in the mug your partner gave you. Your laptop, the good one you finally bought after all of it, The $460 one you have had for 2 years and plan to have for 3 more is open in front of you. And you're thinking back to that cereal aisle, $2.49 versus $5.99. You put the cheap one in your cart and walked away feeling like you won something. Here's the thing though, sometimes you did win. Sometimes the store brand cereal is genuinely the same product made in the same facility and the price difference is entirely marketing. Sometimes cheap is exactly right. The goal was never to stop being cost conscious. The goal was to be conscious of the full cost, not just the one printed on the tag. The shift that changes everything is not dramatic. It does not require a windfall or a financial overhaul. It just requires a pause, a breath before the purchase, a willingness to ask not just, what does this cost me today, but what does this cost me altogether? That pause has saved you more money than any coupon ever did. That question has pointed you toward decisions that held up, that lasted, that delivered, that protected you when you needed protection. You have not become someone who spends lavishly. You have become someone who spends deliberately, someone who knows the difference between a low price and a good deal. Someone who treats their money not just as something to protect from spending, but as a tool to be aimed carefully at things that actually return something real. And somewhere in the becoming of that person, the financial anxiety that used to sit in your chest like a held breath has loosened. Not because you have more money, though you do have more than you would have, but because you trust your own judgment now. You have seen enough of your own story to know how these decisions play out. You know what questions to ask. You know where the traps are. You know that cheap is not always wrong and expensive is not always right, and that the only price that actually matters is the full one. If this story felt familiar, if you saw yourself in any of those moments, the cereal aisle, the laptop, the coat, the inspector you almost hired, it is because these are not unusual stories. They are the normal texture of financial life for most people, and the reason they keep repeating for so many of us is simply that nobody ever laid out the full picture clearly enough. That is why this channel exists. Dollar First is here to walk through these stories with you to give you the kind of honest, grounded financial thinking that actually translates into your real daily life, not the fantasy version, the actual one. If that is the kind of conversation you want to keep having, the subscribe button is right there, and every video that follows will be another chapter of the story you're learning to write better.